Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, Sofia Smallstorm returns to the show. Sophia will discuss how decades of covert U.S. Navy testing in the oceans and on marine life has resulted in significant damage and disruption to the ecosystem, which Sophia believes is the real reason behind the beaching and death of so many marine mammals and other life forms, and how Fukushima is being leveraged in order to provide cover for the Navy's stealth and deadly programs under the guise of national security and military superiority. Our conversation was wide-ranging as we delved deeper into the rabbit hole and come up with yet another example of how the puppet masters have very little regard for life when it comes to implementing their agenda of worldwide dominance and control. And so without further ado, here's Sofia Smallstorm. So Sophia, you sent me your November newsletter, and in that newsletter you talk about the Navy's technology with regard to deep sea sound, and then you got into the technocratic takeover. And the thing that caught my eye as I was going through your newsletter was on page 6, when you talk about Fukushima and that nuclear disaster serving as a cover story for the destruction of marine life as the U.S. Navy establishes more of its warfare training range complexes off our shores. So when I read that, I found that very interesting because it sounded like to me when I was reading it that what you were saying is that Fukushima is not the reason for what's going on, let's say in the Pacific Ocean with the loss of marine life, but it has more to do with the Navy and their testing and their technology and the weapons that they have developed and are continuing to develop. So I was wondering if you can expand on that a little bit more.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying anything definitive about Fukushima because it gets people very, very angry when you start, negating or dismissing Fukushima. It's not anything to be dismissed at all. But the fact is that after 9/11, a few years after, the Navy really, really, really ramped up its offshore warfare testing ranges. They also call them training range complexes. And so early maps, you'll find a lot about this on Rosalind Peterson's website, agriculturedefensecoalition.org. And there's a tab running across the top with the other menu tabs that says U.S. Navy. So the early posters showing the range layouts, and these go all around the United States. There's a Northwest Training Range Complex, Northern California complex, a Southern California complex, then several in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a Key West complex. There's a Guantanamo Range complex. Then in the Atlantic, there's Jacksonville in Florida, Virginia Capes, Narragansett Bay, Bermuda. Bermuda is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It looks like Virginia Capes. And there's Alaska and Hawaii as well. Now, around the actual hubs where they do the experiments, and the experiments are pretty wild, Mike. They use many, many toxic chemicals. They use electromagnetic warfare. They use sonar, radar. We're going to get into the sonar thing in just a bit. But around the hubs, they have what they call a study range. And I was kind of thunderstruck when I wrote an earlier newsletter about this, that the study range around the Hawaii complex is 1/4 of the Pacific Ocean. So they're telling you that we're doing these things here, but their effects may be found here, right?
Right.
Now, I put a blog post up recently. My blog, sofiasmallstorm.com, is the easiest way to get it. And if you can believe this, they've now just put in an application, 2014, they put an application to expand the Atlantic ranges. And the study range there is 3,000 miles running north and south and 3,000 miles east and west. So it starts on the inside of the Gulf of Mexico, but it extends toward Europe, 3,000 miles. Now, I am going to mention to you, this is no small thing, that there is a Japan training range complex belonging to the U.S. Navy, and another one, an Okinawa training range complex. And many people believe that the reason that the Fukushima event happened was because of a man-made underwater earthquake, right?
Right.
So the Navy has been capable of a lot of things over the years, and now it's expanding all this. It's in the name of protecting our borders, homeland security. But I was surprised when I began to read a book that I had ordered last year called War on the Whales by Joshua Horwitz, Horwitz. This was about the damage to the ears and brains of cetaceans. Cetaceans are marine mammals. They are the category that includes dolphins and whales. And way before Fukushima, way before, even before 9/11, going back to the 40s, the Navy began to do sonar experiments in the ocean because the Navy was interested in being able to detect things like Soviet submarines, of course, right?
Right.
So there was a geophysicist at Woods Hole Oceanography Institution. His name was Maurice Ewing, Ewing, and he had this feeling that sound could be carried in this whispering chamber in the ocean. And it wouldn't just be the sounds of the ocean life, because cetaceans are famous for their clicks and whistles and snaps and popping sounds. And we now know that all those sounds, including the calls of whales, they're transported across what's called the deep sound channel in the ocean. And it was Maurice Ewing who discovered and used that deep sound channel to test explosives.
So, Sophia, how did the Navy go about developing technology around the clicks, the pops, the sounds of these marine mammals?
Well, they knew about biosonar, biological sound, and it actually doesn't just come from marine mammals. It comes from fish and crustaceans of all kinds. And these animals rub their skeletal sections together, they drum, they pop air with their bladders, they use their claws to make sound, and they're conducting conversations. And these conversations are refracted from the shallow ocean down to the depths, and then they're sent back up again through differing densities and temperatures of water. So the deep sound channel in the ocean is something that offered to the Navy, if it existed indeed, if they could prove it, then they could send sound for thousands of miles. It would become a sound pipeline for them to use. And they could use active or passive sonar. They could listen or they could emit, right?
Right.
So Maurice Ewing in 1944 got a destroyer, the USS Buckley, to drop 4-pound bombs. They were timed to detonate 3,000 feet underwater. And explosives would be this high decibel, low frequency sound source. And Ewing had a hydrophone suspended from another ship, the Saluda. And the Buckley was supplied with a large number of bombs, and it kept going out, out, out. I think it was 10 miles farther and farther into the Atlantic, and it would drop another bomb, and Ewing would listen through the hydrophone. And so when the Buckley ran out of bombs, it was 900 miles away from Ewing and the Saluda. And Ewing could hear the detonations, the explosions, with almost no signal loss, 1,000 miles away. So now that was a real coup. He said definitively, there is this deep sound channel in the ocean. We can use it with the right equipment. We can listen for the presence of enemy ships. And, I have to say, there's also explosions going on from the oil and gas industry.
Right.
Recreational vehicles. We're constantly using machines in the ocean, and this sound is being refracted and carried all around the world. So,
plus the United States can't possibly be the only country undertaking this type of testing and technology.
Right, but the United States has, planted itself around its own shores, and it's sending destroyers everywhere with very, very intense equipment, and they're running these tests and doing all these training. And remember that we learned from the corporate government material that training allows you to qualify for more equipment, upgrades, more money. So anyway, what happened in 2000 was, in the Bahamas, there was a weekend that a tremendous number of whales began to strand. This was the year 2000, and the whale specialist Ken Balcomb, Balcomb, he went with his wife, and he always had students with him, to try to figure out why these whales were stranding. They were deep sea diving whales, beaked whales. And beaked whales look a lot like dolphins, but they are absolutely magnificent, incredible, incredible creatures. A Cuvier's beaked whale was able to descend 9,816 feet, and the dive lasted 137 minutes. Now, World War II German U-boat would get to its crush depth at 860 to 920 feet. So even the deepest diving of modern submarines can't do what a beaked whale can do.
So that's almost 2 miles, right?
Yeah. And these creatures evolved this way in order to hunt squid. There was an evolutionary flip-flop. The squid developed ink in order to conceal itself in the depths of the canyons. We have the Rose Canyon here, which is a mile deep in San Diego. And it's just off the shores of Scripps Institution of Oceanography. It's literally off the Scripps Pier. The ocean plunges 1 mile down. And guess what? I learned from this book. I thought that Woods Hole and Scripps Oceanography Institution, that these were outfits that cared about marine life. And I think many people who work in them do. But the real reason, they were offshoots of the Navy. And the real reason they exist is to plumb the way that biology works, ocean life, marine biology, and then to try to deliver findings to the technocrats in the Navy so that they can imitate it and ultimately take it over. So the technocratic takeover of biological life was this subject that I, offered as a title to some of these interviews and these writings that I was doing. But the Navy has, over decades, issued into the world the best acousticians, whale specialists, even linguists worked for the Navy. And the first way that they figured out they needed to figure out what are naturally made sounds and what are man-made sounds. And they did it in a very crude way. They simply used their hydrophones to listen. And then as soon as they heard a new sound, they would get a boat over to where it was, and they would capture whatever was making it, kill it, and send it to a lab at Harvard. And this way they made their first database.
So, Sophia, somebody listening to the show might say, okay, so they're trying to mimic these sounds, they're trying to understand how these sounds travel and so on. But how does that affect, or how does that damage the marine life?
All right, so they're using what's called echolocation, and the Navy was interested in being able to do the same. So these whales that stranded in the Bahamas in 2000, their heads were delivered to the lab, the radiology lab of Dr. Darlene Ketten, Ketten, at Harvard. And she did what was called a CT dissection using a CT scanner. It's a digital dissection. And she found that the ears, they had pretty much blown out, hemorrhaged, and the brains had blood pooling in them as well. So these animals are very, very sensitive. And when they have to listen to explosions, whales, beaked whales, have the ability to attenuate sound. They can actually lower volume. They have acoustic fats. They don't have an eardrum like we do and an air pocket like we do in our ears. They have a much more amazingly developed fielding system in their brains. I mean, it's evolved over much longer. When a dolphin makes what they call the creaking door noise, that is up to 2,000 clicks per second even, I've read. I don't even know how that's possible. And the dolphin, with each click, as the click is reflected back, it interprets the meaning of what's coming back to it. So with these evidence of hemorrhaging in the heads of the Cuviers and the Blainesville whale as well, they knew that a pressure event, was what had damaged and ultimately killed these animals, because they will strand. When they can't use the deep sound channel to echolocate, they need to navigate, they need to hunt using these sound mechanisms, feedback mechanisms. They communicate with each other. And if they can't do any of that, they're as good as dead. So they'll go to the beach and they'll strand, and they will allow their own body weight to compress them, it'll compress their lungs if they're big. And if they're small, they'll just dehydrate in the sun. Animal-inspired technology is called biomimetics, and the Navy turned this into bionics, which is a combination of biology and electronics. And it began to exploit this, I call it the global ocean bandwidth, the deep sound channel. It began to use that for its own echolocation exercises.
So the Navy is introducing then sounds that are actually damaging to the marine life, all under the guise of testing and understanding and trying to advance technology. But the natural habitat, let's say, of the beaked whale is being violated by these sounds and by this testing. And it's example you just used, there was tremendous pressure on the head or the skull of that beaked whale, and that is what killed him. It wasn't anything like radiation or any of that type of thing there. It was because there was immense pressure that was put on that beaked whale's skull, and this created a situation where I guess maybe there was confusion, there was pain, I don't know. But it forced the whales to then strand themselves on the beach, because I guess in your article you said it's better for them to die on the beach than, I guess, to be eaten by sharks?
Right. They don't want to be torn to shreds by sharks either. But what happens is when they dive very deeply and then they come up, they get these pressure events in the deep sound channel, and it hurts them too much. They can't go through that layer of ocean, so they dive again. And they can't stay underwater forever, so they end up, Ketton found evidence of nitrogen in their bodies as well, which is what they call the bends, when divers, don't decompress properly. And when you're under too deep, it's too much for them. So when they get hurt by something unnatural that's happening, they'll just go down again, and they'll end up having to die one way or another. So it was discovered when this happened in March 2000 in the vicinity of Great Bahama Canyon. That's the deepest canyon. That's where the Cuviers and Blainesville live, and where they hunt squid and have for millions of years. The very same days that the strandings occurred, the warship USS Karen was videotaped off the islands, and the Karen's equipment included Mark 29 missile batteries, anti-submarine rocket launchers, Tomahawk cruise missiles, Aegis air and surface radar, and then the state-of-the-art hull-mounted AN SQS-53 sonar transmitter. So they have all this stuff that's going to blow out the brains and ears of the marine mammals. And they use it constantly. And they say, now here's what's amazing, Mike. When they make these applications for these training ranges and the expansion of the training ranges, they say very clearly and openly that they intend to take a certain number of marine mammals by their exercises. Take, in the official definition, means harm and or kill. So the number of marine mammals is something like 11.7 million over the years that they've been out there, and they continue to be out there. And it's just, we intend to. This is a consequence. It's necessary because we are protecting America. Now, if you just take the marine mammals, if it's 11 million marine mammals, imagine what the numbers are of all the other creatures.
Right. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. It's very disturbing, Sophia, because these are sentient, living creatures, and they think nothing of, like you said, we're just going to take them, meaning that they're going to be lost, they're going to be killed in the name of national defense or military testing and training, whatever it may be. It's just unbelievable.
Right. Now here's a real admitted, it's not being denied, source of animal destruction in the ocean. And we're not even talking about what it does to humans on the shorelines, because this is not far offshore. So you look at the map, Rosalind has a very big map on her website, and you can see these things are right, basically, a few miles offshore.
So all of this talk about whales washing up and ocean life washing up on the shores, your guess or your thought is that this is not the outcome or the result of Fukushima, but this is most likely the result of the testing that's taking place. And we'll use the Pacific Ocean as an example because most of the stories involve the Pacific Ocean. Is that right?
Right, but there are strandings everywhere. There are strandings in the Mediterranean, strandings on the Atlantic coast, the Bahamas, and not the Pacific Ocean. What happens is I also put on my blog a YouTube that was done by a medical illustrator about auditory transduction. And you can look at that and you can see how the human ear works, which is like one insignificant fraction of the ears of cetaceans that echolocate. But we've got these hair cells in our ears. We have this, the ossicles, the little bones that bang when sound is taken in. And when you overactivate or overstimulate even our hair cells in our ears, they will produce very high levels of glutamate, which is toxic and causes our cells to die. So too much noise, even from leaf blowers and trucks and jackhammers, this is all, the rock concerts everybody went to, I'm sure you went.
Oh, yeah.
So many males are hard of hearing now. And women, I'm sure as well, but they were the big fans of these extremely loud concerts.
Yeah. Yep, I have friends that are in bands that they have damaged their hearing. In fact, myself, because I was in bands for years, and my left ear is a bit sensitive. It's not that bad, but whenever there's music playing, I have to go to the concert and put earplugs in. Otherwise, what will happen is I will walk out with my left ear kind of throbbing, and I'll have a ringing. So your point is well taken.
Another thing that I found very interesting was, so not only did the Navy recruit people who loved working with ocean animals, biology in general, to study it and become experts, but then it built these labs. Where do you think the SeaWorld and the one in Pacific Palisades that was closed, Marineland, this all comes from the Navy. Then they started capturing orcas. I learned from someone that orcas were not called killer whales until the theme parks went up. And the first orca to perform, Namu, there were, I don't know how many people went to see Namu. Let me find out from my newsletter. When he first started to perform, 1966, 120,000 people came to see Namu in his Seattle aquarium. And the poor thing had to do shows twice a day. And he lasted for 334 days. He was never given a day off. And he died of an old bullet wound.
Yeah, it's like circus animals, right? They just keep running them and running them until they fall over and die.
Right, exactly. Very sad. Isn't it sad?
It is sad. In fact, in your newsletter, you talk about the demand for whale oil for the war process. In other words, to create glycerin bombs and also for margarine. I didn't know about the margarine piece of it.
Yeah, whalebone corsets, whale stuff was used in perfume. I shouldn't say stuff, I should know, but I'm forgetting now. Dog food.
Yep. You have a fact here that says in 1939 alone, whalers killed almost 40,000 blue whales.
Those are just the blue whales.
Those are just the blue whales. It's just unbelievable. I mean, the point we're trying to make, folks, is that there's a total disregard for living animals, creatures. There's a total disregard, So it doesn't just extend itself out to human beings killing themselves. It extends out to a disregard for all life. And it's just really, really, it's sobering, Sophia, to read. When I read your newsletter, it was very sobering because, a lot of times people don't want to know about this stuff or read about it. And then when you read it, it'll make you sit back and think to yourself, wow, this is just really incredible that this is how the world is conducted. It's a total disregard for life.
Right, and I also want to draw attention to commercial fishing. A book was sent to me called Against the Tide by Richard Adams Carey, Carey. And I read that book. I absolutely couldn't believe the numbers I was reading about fishing. And once refrigeration came to fishing boats, they could just stay out there, and they used now, like mass fishing techniques, gill netting, long lining, where they throw a line out and it's got loads and loads of hooks on it. And they'll just pull in whatever attaches itself or gets caught in the net. And because of this methodology, you've got what's called bycatch. Bycatch means what you catch in addition to what you've set out to catch, right?
Right.
And the species caught in this bycatch are often just, oh, we don't want them. Let's chuck them back over. Let's let them asphyxiate in the net, and then we'll chuck them back. So the millions and millions and millions and millions of pounds of fish every year just off Cape Cod. This book was about Cape Cod fisheries. I could not believe it. And everybody developed a taste for fish. Everyone all over the United States. In the inland states wanted fish. In Oklahoma, where there's no fish, people were developing a taste for fish. I'm not saying that's wrong. But when you plunder the ocean and you take out what exceeds reproductive rates, then you're going to be in a pickle one day. So there was this very famous article called The Broken Ocean that was written, on the internet of, I think it was last year sometime. Somebody sailed across the Pacific and reported that everything was dead in it, nothing was alive. Well, that's not just because of Fukushima. I mean, we have plundered the ocean. We have changed the nature of the ocean. The coral reefs are going because we've taken species out. That's called the cascade effect. When you take too much of one thing out, then everything underneath it and over it, the numbers change. The things that are being predated on, if that's the word, by one species that everybody's taken out of the ocean because there's a fad for it, those things will thrive. Right now, our reefs are being taken over by algae. We have algae-dominated reef systems rather than coral-dominated reef systems. And it's because plants are the lowest things in the marine chain. And if there's nothing eating them, then they'll grow everywhere, right?
Right.
So the cascade effect of fishing, the bycatch, the sheer numbers are just incredibly mind-boggling. I can't even believe that people could consume this many millions of pounds of fish. And Reagan put incentives out for people to get, really into commercial fishing. And all these venture capitalists in the 80s, they started buying fishing boats and becoming, owners of fisheries. And it just took even more out of the ocean.
Can we draw a correlation, Sophia, in your mind? And I know I'm surmising here, but those stories, and we see them every once in a while, where thousands of birds fall from the sky.
Mm-hmm.
I've always suspected that was some kind of technology that was being used also, because there's never, ever been, to the best of my knowledge, any logical, reasonable explanation as to why hundreds to thousands of birds would just simply fall out of the sky.
Right. So in the ocean, fish, when they are terrified, they form what's called a bait ball. Have you ever seen one? Or
No.
Okay, I've actually seen a couple, and I've only seen small ones. I've been told that bait balls can become enormous. But the one I saw was the couple I've seen, about 5 feet wide. It's a big ball of fish. They all go running to each other because they figure if a predator is coming, if we're all together, there's safety in numbers. The predator will just take a bite out of the bait ball, but most likely, especially if I'm at the center of it, I'm not going to be affected. So the bigger the bait ball gets, the safer the fish feel, except for the ones on the outside. But what happens to them if they huddle too long, they get asphyxiated. They can't survive that close together. So there have been all these strandings, you could call them, these fish die-offs of bait fish and whatnot here in Southern California. Redondo Beach is covered with bait fish. Marina del Rey had that. And I suspected then that it was some Navy activity, something that reached that particular area and drove those populations to the shore because they gathered in their huddles and then they asphyxiated and they washed up on shore. But many years ago in the 90s, I went down to La Jolla Cove to swim, and I couldn't believe it because there were all people scribbling on notepads. They were marine biologists, and the nature of La Jolla Cove was very different that day. There were thousands and thousands of dead squid, Mike, in the water, and they were just kind of lapping the shore. And I went in, the water was dark blue and it reeked of their ink, and I still wanted to swim, so I plunged in. I swam over these gross dead squid, the poor things, and it was horrible. And this was long before anybody had knowledge of what we have knowledge of today. It wasn't a conspiracy theory, but the marine biologists were all saying, this is the Navy. The Navy did something with its sonar, and these squid have all died and washed up on the beach. And that was back in the 90s, probably the early 90s or mid-90s.
I'll tell you, Sophia, this is a well-kept secret because most people, in fact, I'm going to say most folks listening to this show are going to have no idea the degree in which the Navy is doing this type of testing, deploying this type of technology, and what's happening. Most people do not know what's happening to the marine life. And I mean, again, it's a lot of it today is chalked up to Fukushima, but a lot of what we're talking about here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is before Fukushima.
Yeah, long before. And I want to explain what's happening to pinnipeds. Pinnipeds are marine mammals also, and they are seals and sea lions and elephant seals. I think it was the 1970s, we had the Marine Mammal Protection Act passed, and that primarily was to help out seals that were being clubbed for their skins, furs, for coats, and then of course whales. Whales were being endangered because everybody, even the whaling industry, started to use explosives to frighten whales, to herd them and dog them into captivity. So the Marine Mammal Protection Act put like a safety net, metaphorically, around whales, dolphins, seals, sea lions. And we had Jaws in 1975. It was one of the first, if not the first, blockbuster, right, movie.
Right.
Universal Studios. And Jaws terrified so many people into killing sharks. They just went nuts. Fishermen went out there and they were after great whites, and one guy put a great white on ice in a semi-trailer and drove it up and down the 5 freeway for everybody to see. And so the killing of sharks that began with Jaws, and then subsequently the killing of sharks that followed the popularity of shark fin soup, which used to be a delicacy in China. Only the nobility were able to afford it. It was something you had at a wedding, maybe, to bring good luck. But it became a very popular foreign kind of a menu choice in all the cities of the United States, especially San Francisco and the hip restaurants there. So there's a giant industry that's after shark fins, and they are taking sharks out of the ocean every year, and all they do is whack the fins off, put them in the refrigerated containers that they have on the boat, and they throw the finless shark back into the ocean where it just dies.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because they're not going to take the whole shark back. They
Oh my God.
Fins. So there is a movie about this called Shark Water that's very, very, very terrible to watch. And
some of these things I can't even watch, Sophia. I have to be honest with you. Some of it is so disturbing, and I like to think of myself as someone who can watch this stuff and I can reconcile it. Okay, look, this is what's happening. You need to know this is happening. But I have to tell you, the ignorance and the lack of empathy that these groups and these people that they put forth is just mind-numbing.
It is mind-numbing, Mike. And sharks are the street sweepers of the ocean.
Yeah.
The shark expert Ralph Collier, who I know very well, has told me this all the time. If you take sharks out of the ocean, you are going to really upset the ocean ecology. Sharks are big and small. They eat all kinds of things. And if you just take them out, you don't even care what kind. The oceanic white-tip was the most prevalent shark in the ocean. It was all over the world. It's almost gone. And I was going to segue into the seals and sea lions. So when a white shark, a great white, is small, it feeds on fish. It starts out by feeding on grunion. Grunion are what we have hatching on our shores, very, very small bait fish type things. And then the bigger it gets, it eats bigger and bigger fish. Well, sharks are warm-blooded, white sharks, Carcharodon carcharias. And they have livers that are full of something that you'll know from the vaccine lore that we're into, squalene. Squalene is shark liver oil. And a 4,000-pound shark can have a 1,300-pound liver. It's literally like a gas tank. And they get this oil out of marine mammal fat. They have to be able to produce bursts of speed in cold temperatures in order to hunt. So the shark, when it reaches the length of about 8-9 feet, it can actually stop going after fish as its main diet and start hunting harbor seals, which are small seals. And then when it gets the length of about 11-12 feet, it can do sea lions. And then when it gets to the length of 15, 16, 17 feet, it can do elephant seals. So this is where you get this, the legend of the hungry shark that hadn't fed for weeks. I've been hearing this before I knew much about sharks. And I would think, what? The ocean is full of food. What do you mean hasn't fed for weeks? But they are after a certain kind of nutrient, which is a marine mammal with lots of fat. So when the white sharks were killed for sport, because people were terrified of them from Jaws, the numbers of marine mammals just absolutely exploded because white sharks eat marine mammals. So where once you had on the California coast 50,000 seals and sea lions in the 70s, you've now got upwards of 300,000. And so what's happening to them? They're starving because there are too many of them.
Yeah.
And I know people personally who have cried tears because they have seen shivering, sickly-looking seals and sea lions on the beach, and you can count their ribs, and they think it's from Fukushima. It's not from Fukushima. It's the cascade effect. Take out their predators, and there are going to be too many of them, and there's not enough fish, because you look under them on the marine chain. There isn't enough stuff for them to eat. So some of them are going to die.
So, Sophia, the question becomes, all these people that are involved in marine biology, all of these PhDs and these scientists and these researchers, I mean, don't they know this? You don't hear anything about it. It's like you and I, you know about it, and thank God you know about it, and we can get this communicated out. I guess the reason why I'm angry about this is that how come, I know the answer to this, so I guess it's a rhetorical question, but this is never disseminated out to the population. People are led to believe that something from Fukushima is creating this, when in fact, it has nothing to do with Fukushima. It's very disturbing to me that there are people who are in positions of knowledge and knowing that allow the lies or allow the deception to prevail.
Okay, let me tell you something else. Please hold the seat of your chair with both hands. Do you know what cesium-137 is?
Well, I know it's an element, yes.
Yes, so it's one of the dangerous isotopes that gets released from the process called fission, uranium fission, right? When you detonate a nuclear bomb, or you have a nuclear explosion like Fukushima, you're going to get iodine-131, which is an isotope of iodine that's very unstable, and they're heavy in the protons and neutron mix. So they're not equal. They don't have a balance of protons and neutrons. So they're like, they jostle around all the time. And they release energy. That's what radioactivity is. So when you get iodine-131, it has a half-life. You've heard this term, right?
Right.
That half-life is only 8 days, iodine-131. So there have been many, many, many 8-day periods since 2011 when Fukushima happened. But two other things that get released when uranium is broken down is cesium-137 and strontium-90. Now, those isotopes are also very unsafe for biological life. And they are what's called bone seekers because they masquerade in their molecular shape. The body, I always say, is biochemically blind. It's not used to certain things. So if it sees something that looks like something, it takes it. Same reason that, little fishies in the ocean scarf down this stuff called nurdles, plastic debris, because they think it looks like zooplankton. They don't know. So cesium-137 and strontium-90 masquerade as calcium and potassium. So they start going to our calcium-rich tissues and embedding themselves. And they have a half-life of 30 years and 28 years. So that's much worse for us, right?
Right.
The argument is that the cesium-137 and the strontium-90 from Fukushima is passing through the ocean, and it's going up the trophic chain, generation to generation. It becomes concentrated in the predation, the thing that eats the other thing gets more of cesium and strontium in it, the isotopes. But let me tell you what I just learned. They use cesium-137 in the food industry, if you can believe it, Mike, to detect the age of wines and cheese. And it's a dating mechanism, because after the fallout of the atomic testing in the 50s and 60s, so much cesium-137 was spewed all over the world that it's in the grapes. The vineyards are using it, the wineries, to see how old the wine is. Is this unbelievable?
This is truly unbelievable.
Just Google it. It's called datation, datation, something like that. But it's a dating food industry mechanism to find aging. You can Google it.
Wow.
They look for the isotope from the fallout.
I'm going to put a link in the show notes for that, Sophia.
I'll send you the website. I just found one website that talked all about it in different languages, and it's commonplace. They used a germanium detector. So the question you asked was, why aren't people talking about this? To me, all these things are known by certain segments of industry, business, military, the world, right? But then it's the stringing these things together that brings real meaning to their existence. And there's also the strategy of fear. It's very convenient for everyone to be pointing the finger at Fukushima and thereby not saying a word about the U.S. Navy. That is silenced, which is good for the Navy.
Right.
And not saying anything about wireless radiation. These anti-nuclear radiation activists, they don't even consider wireless radiation, electromagnetic radiation. They don't even call it that. They call it electromagnetic pollution. So I believe that the debate over nuclear energy, power plants, nuclear explosives, detonations, Fukushima, accidents, has been rekindled in order to mask the seriousness of the electromagnetic radiation age that we're all living in and all addicted to, and in order to mask the activities of the United States Navy.
So another diversion, another distraction.
Yeah, it's convenient to cover that up.
Yeah.
Both those things with this debate.
It's very disturbing, Sophia. And, I have to ask this question because I'm sure a lot in the audience are shaking their heads as I am right now. Where do these people that are leading these efforts, these, I'll call them psychopaths, where are they taking this? Where do they think at the end of the day all of this is going to land? How do they think anyone, including themselves, is going to benefit from doing the things that they're doing? I'm just putting that question out there. I don't, if you have thoughts on it. I know you don't have the answer because you're not in their heads, but where are they going with this? And you mentioned the technocratic takeover as an example in your newsletter.
I think a lot of the people who participate, whether they're, in whatever field they're in. For instance, the first recording of cetacean voices, 1962, 2 Navy guys. One was a linguist and the other was a biologist, William Sheville and Bill Watkins. And they traveled the oceans over, 3 decades. And they recorded the sounds of 18 marine mammal species and released an album. So, that's nice, you say. Wow, that's cool. And they were probably, being the first to have done this, they were showcased. So a lot of these people like John Lilly, he was a Dartmouth Medical School brain specialist, an inventor, an electronics wizard, a trained psychoanalyst. He went to Marineland and he plunged an electrode into a dolphin's brain, loaded it with voltage, and then began to increase the current. And the more he increased that voltage, the more vocalizing the dolphin did. And it was whistles, I'm going to just read, more exuberant vocalizing than I'd ever heard before. Whistles, buzzings, raspings, barks, Bronx cheer-like noises were emitted. One time the dolphin mimicked my speaking voice so well that my wife laughed out loud and he copied her laughter. So then he made a lever and the dolphin was able to push the lever with its beak to activate the electrical charge itself. And it pushed faster and faster and faster and faster, gave itself a seizure, and it died. So this neurostimulation, this discovery of self-stimulation by the dolphin that drove it to its own death was quite remarkable for Lilly. And he couldn't believe that dolphins could mimic human speech.
Right.
He decided that he had tapped into another whispering chamber, that of interspecies communication. And he announced this at a conference, the 1958 annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association in San Francisco. And he said that dolphins offer us a gateway to cosmic consciousness. And guess who jumped up to sponsor research on this?
The Navy.
Of course. So maybe what they want is the tunnel into cosmic consciousness, Mike.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, Sophia. I'm at a loss as to what they think their end game is when they destroy everything. The last man standing. I mean, what does he have at the end of the day?
Well, see, I think they believe and expect that nothing will be destroyed because they will have the secrets, the building blocks to biology and to life. So what is conveniently removed from the natural process itself, they will step in and substitute with their technologies. So we will have fish in the ocean, but they will be all genetically engineered. They will be released in, controlled numbers. We will have species that won't be all continually evolving out of control. They want the control and they want to pepper the world with the right number of birds and trees and fish and flowers and people. And then they will be able to say, this is appropriate for this region. This is appropriate for this region. And
yeah, I suspect that you're very right. It's like one big zoo. Just unbelievable. Now, this technocratic takeover, you said that you had a correspondence with a friend from Brazil who offered up the term technocracy.
Right. It was really the Patrick Wood term, and it refers kind of to the 1930s movement that was all trilateral commission, these kind of people. But technocracy has now become the pinnacle of what you would call the military, industrial, pharmaceutical complex. The corporatocracy has buried itself into or married to itself to technocracy as well. And that's why we get the funding for all this, because these Navy and military divisions, they're all corporations. Everything is incorporated now.
Yes.
And it exists to do contracting, to receive funding, and the funding is all, just made out of air by the super banks. So there's plenty of money for all this. And then at the bottom of this structure is all of us, we're like the little fishies and guppies. We're going, give me a job, I'll build something. I'll look at something, I'll create something, I'll do this work for you. And we are happy to receive what we call federal contracts and be the little underlings that make all this possible without thinking about what you and I have just talked about in this show.
Right. You're sitting in a little silo doing your little bit, but you're not connecting any dots. There's no peripheral vision.
No.
You know what I watched? I went to go see the fourth installment of the Hunger Games on the weekend, and then after that, I refreshed myself on the first three installments. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if you ever watched that movie. It's very, very telling. Basically, they're rolling out exactly what it is that you and I are talking about on this show. And if anybody hasn't seen the Hunger Games, because I resisted for the longest time, and my daughter actually got me into it. And once I sat down and watched it, and I took it in, I was very impressed because, like I said, they are communicating out what it is that's on the radar, what it is, what's on the table, or how they're setting the table for the future. And again, Sophia, it's a lot about what we talked about in this show.
Well, Mike, I was listening to your show with Ole Damegard yesterday.
Okay, the one about the Paris attacks?
Paris, right.
Yeah.
In that, I think it was kind of near the beginning, he said that there's this thing called karma, like we haven't heard of that.
Right.
But yeah, and he said that when the perps show us, by way of films and games and whatnot, what they plan to do to us, and if we just sit there goggle-eyed, then we have it coming.
It's fair game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ole and I have talked about this a couple of times on and off air. So, and the thing is, Sophia, it is out there. They do put it out there. It's conditioning, it's predictive programming. And maybe to a lot of folks who are listening to this show, that's not new news to them. But if we have some new listeners, and I'm going to ask that you pay attention to some of these things. This direction is being communicated out. It will take time. These controllers, time, they believe, is on their side, not on ours. So if it takes years, if it takes decades, whatever, so be it. They're going to continue this march very methodically, incrementally, although it's becoming less and less incremental these days, because I think they've realized how dumbed down, truly dumbed down, the masses are. I think that they just said, you know what? We don't have to incrementalize this anymore. We don't have to take it methodically. We could take very large steps because the apathy and the denial and the level of unawareness is so huge. We can do whatever we want.
And Mike, they're trying to cultivate in us the willingness to go along with them. So
That's
just
right.
sitting, on our hands, doing nothing, watching their programs and going, ooh, oh, wow. That's one level of participation. But then the other is, for instance, in this commercial fishing book that I read, Against the Tide by Richard Carey, I was surprised because I didn't know that cod was not considered a desirable kind of fish at one time. And then when we started running out of cod, and there's almost no cod now off Cape Cod, things like dogfish, they became more popular. Nobody would eat dogfish at one time. And I'm hoping that I'm getting all the species right. But, okay, so now when stuff isn't available in its natural form, they're going to give us the lab created versions of it. And we're going to be very, feel like glowing good citizens if we will eat lab meat instead of real meat. So when the people are willing to go and put in their mouths something that is totally out of a lab, that is meant to represent the real thing, and they pat themselves on the back for that, then we will have really joined in the march. And I'm a vegan. I don't eat salmon and meat myself. But I remember reading an article which was about some kind of meat that they made. And then they've made it, I hate to say this, but they've made meat out of feces.
Yeah.
And they are laughing at us. And the test subjects said that they didn't like the meat too much. I'm not talking about the feces meat, but the other one, the lab-created meat. And the scientists simply said, well, when there's no other meat, you'll eat it. You'll develop a taste for it.
Right.
But if there is enough flavoring, and these big companies like International Flavors and Fragrances, IFF, It's on the East Coast.
Yes.
They actually have the chemical formulas that mimic the taste of potatoes, for instance, the taste of hamburger, the taste of this, that, because the processed food is so lifeless that it doesn't taste anything like what it's supposed to. So when food is processed that much, chemicals are injected in it that make it taste like what it's supposed to.
Yeah.
This is big biz.
It's big biz, and it is an extremely dysfunctional world that we live in. Everything that's going on, it's not natural. It's anti-humanity. It's anti-life, actually, right? Because we talked about the marine life. So I think that, it's incumbent upon folks to listen to shows like this, to start getting their heads wrapped around reality. Reality is not what is presented to you in the media, on TV, or wherever it is that you're getting your inputs from. You have to start getting your head wrapped around that we have quite a problem that we have to solve. And I'm talking about worldwide. Anyway, Sophia, I know I sound a little somber. I don't mean to sound that way. It's just that, it's sobering, this information. It really is. It's hard to put a happy face on when we're talking about, what they're doing to dolphins, what they're doing to the beaked whales, to the marine life in general, and then what they're doing. I mentioned about birds falling out of the sky, and that's not even to talk about all the things that they're doing and implementing across the board to humans with
Right.
the air, the water, the food, and the vaccines, and the flu shots, and
We're doing all that too. I mean, you and I know what we know, but as someone said famously, we don't know what we don't know, right?
That's right, yeah.
So as we learn, it becomes very difficult to keep readjusting your trajectory so that you're aware of this and you're aware of that. I mean, where do you go? Where do you go? It's becoming so artificial. I wrote in my newsletter that when natural phenomena are no longer mysteries, artifice will stand in for life itself, and none of us will be the wiser. And we're not going to live more than 80-something years if we're lucky, right?
Right.
But so our lifespan is relatively short. But in these successive generations that are weaned on a culture that we consider to be very strange, even abhorrent, unpleasant, they're going to consider all this to be quite normal. So that's the whole trick. The trick is that as generations unfold, this all becomes more and more normalized.
Well, that's what I meant before about the methodical, incremental approach, where it does normalize. People that generations today do not know what we know. In other words, as an example, a real quick example, you and I remember what the sky looked like before they started aerosol spraying. If you talk to kids today, if you talk to teenagers, 16, 17, 18-year-olds today, and you talk to them about spraying, chemtrails, they look at you like you have three eyes in your head. They don't know what you're talking about. They're like, no, that's normal. And they pay absolutely no attention to it because that is the sky they have seen since the day they looked up. Mm-hmm. And right, so that is a big part of the problem, is the fact that future generations, as you said, are going to see these things as the norm. They have no benchmark, they have no baseline, they have no way to compare it. So they just accept whatever it is that is presented to them on that particular day or that moment.
I was just about to spring into the transgender discussion, but let me not.
Well, you could if you'd like.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I mean, all this is very, very sobering, as you said. It's disturbing, but our kids are going to consider it normal, and their kids are going to consider it just great.
So, Sophia, you have been very generous with your time, as you always are. But before we head out, where can our listeners learn more about your work, your research, and most importantly, your avatar products?
Well, I have the big website, aboutthesky.com. It started out as a chemtrails website, and then I've really been active on 2 pages of it recently, which is the podcast page where you will be featured and are already featured, And then the blog page, Smallstorm blog. And that can be quickly accessed at www.sofiasmallstorm.com. Sophia with an F, not a PH. And then the Avatar Products is my online store. So AVATAR products.com. I put things there that have solved major problems for me. I'm always cold at night, and so I put on the front page the Sherpa bed warmer. I'm telling you, that thing works. It is a non-electrified, no-brainer twist on a blanket. It's a sleeping pad. You put it underneath your fitted sheet. It's made of fleece, which everybody uses in the form of jackets and whatnot these days. It's synthetic, but you don't touch it because you have your sheet on top of it. And it collects your body heat from under you all night long and recycles it right into your skin. Your toes are warm all night. You won't believe how easily this thing can remedy the, you go to sleep and your back is all hunched and your feet are freezing. So you can turn the heat off that night and sleep with this bed warmer. So I just want people to take a look. It's a great present for the winter, for Christmas, or use it yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take a look at it.
Hot water bottles help too. Actually, if you combine the hot water bottle, standard hot water bottle with a Sherpa bed warmer, throw the hot water bottle in the bed before you get in, and then kick it down to the bottom of the bed. It is mind-blowingly fantastic.
Okay, that's great. And you have other products too. Did you want to cover some of those?
Well, I've talked about iodine and magnesium. I've got the magnesium spray now, which is an excellent deodorant. You spray a few squirts in your palm and you transfer it with your fingers to your armpits. What I've learned now is that magnesium chloride, I always knew it was antimicrobial, that's why it works so well as a deodorant, but it actually changes the biome in your armpits. So yeah, it's cheaper than regular deodorant. It doesn't mess up your clothes or stain. It's unscented. And magnesium chloride, it's fantastic. And it takes pain away, stiff necks, arthritic pain.
Right.
Cream is very good. The cream tends not to burn or sting. Women report a little bit of stinging with the magnesium chloride brine, the spray. But men don't seem to have a problem with the spray. And I would say use that as deodorant. You will like it.
And your magnesium cream, because I've mentioned this on a previous show, is fantastic to help relieve if you have kind of body aches, pains, muscle aches, that type of thing. It works very well.
Yes, the magnesium cream penetrates deeply. It's a great moisturizer, and it doesn't burn or sting the way the spray might. But now I have the same biochemist making the spray for me in a bottle, an 8-ounce bottle, which is about $15, I think. So it's very reasonable. But you're very kind to ask. I encourage people always to take iodine, go to that show that you and I did and watch that iodine PowerPoint. That's a wonderful product. And, it's a mineral. It's something we're very deficient in, just
exactly.
Like magnesium. And these are simple ways. The other way is sea salt, Mike. I used to sell sea salt to friends. I used to give it to them as gifts, and I used to sell a pound here and there. But I don't do it anymore, and I never did it on the website. But sea salt has 100 or so trace minerals, and that is exactly what we need for maximum benefit to all of our internal biochemical activity. We need those trace minerals. Many of them are ions. They are electrolytes. They help our cells take energy and do all the detoxing. And all you need is real salt. So it's not just sea salt, it's earth salt. Himalayan salt, Bolivian mountain salt, sea salt, they all have the mineral complement, which the table salt does not have. That is a devitalized, dried out, useless, toxic, shelf, stable, pretty white, snow white food, but it does nothing. That's table salt, and that is salt that they take the impurities out of. You know what those impurities are? All those minerals. So they strip it down to sodium chloride. All natural salt is about 98% sodium chloride. And then the rest of the 2% is all these minerals, tons of them that you need in trace amounts for your biological health. So when food processors take all the quote-unquote impurities out of salt, they've now denatured it and devitalized it and made it toxic. You cannot simply take sodium chloride in your body without all those other minerals. It leaves your cells in a state of like hell. And I would urge people to get some sea salt or earth salt and use that instead of table salt, because table salt is not good. And the iodine, let me just say this. In the 20s, they noticed that people in the landlocked states, the Midwest, were getting goiters. Goiters are big balls in your throat. It's your thyroid, like a big golf ball or baseball it's swollen. It's actually looking for iodine. It's saying, where's iodine? I need iodine. And the theory is that the glaciers went tearing through the Midwest. They left the Great Lakes in their wake later, but they eroded the soil. So stripping and eroding soil depletes it of minerals, particularly iodine, which we really need. And therefore, people who aren't living coastally and not able to get iodine vapor from the sea or seawater, iodine itself. One reason I just found kelp on the seashore is brown, Mike, because it has iodine. I mean, this is like a no-brainer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, seaweed is brown because it has iodine in it. It actually stores iodine. But anyway, so...
Well, fantastic products. I use them, so I can vouch for them. And I want to say, Sofia, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
You're very kind, and I love being your guest, and we will do this on a regular basis.
We will. All right, Sofia, have a great evening, and we will connect again soon.
Yes, you too, Mike. Thank you.
Bye-bye now. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are included in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.